So I'd like to officially welcome you all to Weaving Anti-Capitalist Futurism, Attraction Spells Without the Bougie Bullshit. We're really glad you're here. And this event is part of a Vermont Witch Camp 2021 online experience. The Vermont Witch Camp community has been meeting in person for 25 years. Because of the pandemic, 2021 is the second online gathering. Vermont Witch Camp organizers hope in 2022 to once again circle in the mountains of Vermont to share food, laughter, and ritual. We hope that you feel nourished by and connected to the community through this event. You can continue that connection anytime by dropping by the Vermont Witch Camp website at vermontwitchcamp.net. And I think Murphy can post that in the chat for us. Also,
I will post that, and also just a note, there's plenty, we also publicize this workshop will be on the Vermont Witch Camp Circle. So if you're on here and you're like, oh, I know Murphy or I know Jamie, but what's this Witch Camp thing? You're very welcome to attend. I think we're gonna enjoy this. And if you're intrigued and you're like, what else does Vermont Witch Camp put on? You can go to this link and you can look at the other events that are happening this week through that organization.
Yes, it's good stuff. Thank you. And also, if you are part of the community, or even if you're not, and you'd like to help offset the administrative costs of Vermont Witch Camp, you can contribute to the organization through the donation button on the main page of their website. And with that, I would like to welcome all of our supporters in the unseen world. And when I say that, we extend welcome and the flame of our hearth and our hearts to all the gods, all the familiars, supporters, ancestors, crawling ones, flying ones, swimming ones, all those who gather around to support us, to uplift us, because they're curious about us or they want to learn from us. We welcome you. And I'm in a place where it's not safe to have an open flame, so I'm going to turn on a little LED flame to symbolize this, and the flame will be lit during our entire time together tonight. So welcome to all of the unseen ones.
Jamie, I would like to offer a land acknowledgement before we start. And I am teaching today from the land of the Dakota people and the Anishinaabe people in Minnesota. I'm in Minneapolis currently supporting the movement to try and stop the Line 3 pipeline that's going through this territory. Usually I'm teaching from the Abenaki territory in so-called Vermont, but here I am in the Midwest today. And Jamie is teaching from the lands of the Muskogee people down in so-called Alabama. And we want to invite everyone on this call to send prayers of support and respect to the Indigenous people on their land. And if you would like to put the name of those people in the chat right now as a way of honoring them in this circle, you're really welcome to do that. All these peoples offer us this legacy of survival, and they still steward the land that we live on. We want to affirm their sovereignty on the land. And one of the ways that I find can be useful sometimes to really make this more concrete and not as just conceptual is to remember the Indigenous land skills that come from these peoples that we still use and appreciate in some way. So I went through and made just a little list of skills that come to us specifically from the Dakota and Anishinaabe peoples, and also many other of the Indigenous peoples on Turtle Island. Those include harvesting and processing wild rice, which is an incredible food native to the place where I am today, and that is very threatened by the pipeline that we're trying to stop that's going through the wetlands and rice lakes of this area. The technology of boiling maple sap to make maple syrup is an Indigenous technology. So if you ever enjoy maple syrup on your pancakes, take a moment to remember where that comes from. The art of making birch bark baskets is something that was practiced up here. Just about everything that has to do with canoes and canoe paddles and canoe poles, all that kind of technology comes to us in its current forms from Indigenous people. Many of the most popular canoes on the market today are based on Indigenous canoe forms and designs that are hard to improve. They're really good. The technology of snowshoes for getting around in the winter, if that's something you like to do, that is an Indigenous technology. And there are also many sacred stories that come down to us from these people about the human relationship with the beaver, with the moose, with the wolf, with the deer, all of these creatures of the northern forests and waterways here where I am teaching from today. So I want to send out gratitude for all this wisdom passed to us through the elders, past and present, both where I am teaching from today and where probably all of you are as well. If you're dialing in from Europe, it's slightly more complicated, but if you're on Turtle Island, this is something it's really important to remember to be grateful for on a regular basis. So thanks to the peoples of these lands.
So as Murphy mentioned, we have folks that know us from Vermont Witch Camp here. We have folks that know us from Way of the Weaver. We have folks that know us from either Mountain Song expeditions or other festivals that Murphy and I have taught and attended. So everybody's welcome. If you don't know much about us, we just wanted to briefly introduce ourselves. And it is my honor to go first and introduce Murphy. So Murphy and I are the co-founders and teachers of Way of the Weaver. That's an all-gender inclusive program of magical inquiry, justice, and community building. Our programs include Zoom-based modules and in-person retreats in Central Vermont. Murphy, my collaborator, Murphy uses they, them pronouns, is a queer transmasculine priestess, wilderness guide, activist, and student of the sacred hunt. They have been casting circles since 1998 and have taught both magic and wilderness skills across the United States. They have pursued a special study of trance work, the Norse runes, archery as a magical practice, and meaningful rituals to honor the animals and plants who die to feed us.
Thanks, Jamie. I get to introduce Jamie now. Jamie uses she, her pronouns, and she is a writer, a priestess, and a catalyst. She began studying folklore, myth, and magic and the occult in 1999. So we started right around the same time. Over the years, she found that her spiritual gifts are rooted in storytelling, oracular traditions, trance arts, and liminal rites. She is a longtime mystic at heart. She holds a BA in philosophy, and she studied as a priestess with the Sisterhood of Avalon for 13 years. So I'm just very excited to get to collaborate once again with Jamie on this class for you. We've really enjoyed working with each other as a teaching team, and I hope you all get a lot out of it too. For this workshop today, there is no cost to attend. We're doing this for free for Vermont Witch Camp and for anyone else who wants to join. But you are welcome to make a donation if you would like. If you want to show your gratitude in some way, we would ask you to direct those donations to either the Yellowhammer Fund for Reproductive Justice in Alabama and the Deep South. Jamie will put those links in the chat. As many of you know, there's a lot of threats to Roe v. Wade right now, and a lot of them are coming out of the Deep South. And this is people who are working on the ground to mitigate the harm there. And the other option we want to suggest today is the Susu Community Farm Project in Vermont, which is a BIPOC owned and directed farm project and community building project in the Brattleboro area. So one based where Jamie is, one based where I live, and you're welcome to donate to those folks if you feel moved to show gratitude. So we're going to dive right into the teaching topics for the evening. And for this class on attraction spells, we figured we first might want to just clear up this little definition of what is a spell. So we've had students ask us this before of like, what is a spell and what is magic? Spells versus magic, like where do you draw the line? And we tend to go along with a popular definition of magic that if it was put forward by Dion Fortune, a magical practitioner quite a while ago, which is that magic is the art of changing consciousness at will. So that's our broad definition of magic, or one of them anyway. And spells are a skill set within magic. It's like a subcategory, specifically designed to move or change a part of your world. So that part could be physical, it could be mental, it could be spiritual, but you're trying to create some kind of change in your world. Other skill sets within magic that are not spells include divination, trance journeying, prefixing a ritual, energy work, the practice of devotion. There's like all kinds of magic. Spell work is just one category within magic. And for something to be a spell, it needs to include a purpose or intention that involves change. It needs to include a combination or separation of discrete elements. So this can take many, many forms. It can be physical items that you're combining to make a talisman, or like a cord that you're cutting to like let something go. It could be verbal elements, a spoken charm or sung charm of some kind, written or spoken elements, or just purely like spiritual energetic elements. But you're combining or separating things in some way when you do a spell to create that change. And a spell also includes an investment of power, a charge of power. You're raising energy in some way to give that spell the energy it needs to create that change. So the result of a spell is a shift in personal outlook or perspective or confidence in the spellcaster themselves, and an answering shift in the energy of the world around you. So that's, if the spell is successful, that's what you're going to see. So, and again, things that are not spells include like a tarot reading, communicating with the unseen ones, including deities, and rituals of celebration, grief, seasonal observances, things like that, a Reiki session. Those things are not spells. So hopefully that just helps disambiguate what we're actually talking about today. And we're specifically talking about attraction spells. With all kinds of spells, it's really important to think about the impact of the spell. And Jamie's going to talk a little bit about that.
And we often hear in magical circles talking about intention and setting intention and having an intention, or even the right intention. I mentioned in my introduction of Way of the Weaver, we try to weave together threads of justice and community and magical study. So we talk about intent and impact when we talk about magic or spellcraft. And when we mention the importance of impact over intention, we're talking here about a matter of justice. And for many folks, this is a new thought that they've encountered, that impact is actually more important than intention. And the reason that's a matter of justice is we need to realize that when it comes to people's lives and identities, the impact of our actions can be profound and it can be wide-reaching. And that's more important than the question of our intent. So, it's a magical practice in the service of justice and liberation to ask ourselves what might be or might have been the impact of our actions and or words. And we need to step back and listen when we're being told, and that can be by someone, by divination, by guides, by intuition, by reading a room, that the impact of our actions is out of step with our intentions or our personal moral and ethical code of honor. And if you're interested in a little bit more introduction and discussion about intent versus impact, there's a helpful article, and Murphy can copy and paste that into the chat window, and you can check that out when you have some more time. But we'd like to make sure that we are considering both intent and impact when we talk about spellcraft. So attraction spells and the law of attraction. This is more at the, we're here at the disambiguation station, and this is more about that. So the law of attraction is something you've probably heard of if you've been on the internet or you've been around the overculture in any way. And the law of attraction, it actually stems from a publication called The Kybalion, or the 7 Hermetic Principles. And this particular publication, even though it is introduced and bandied about as something ancient, it is not based on an ancient document. The secret is not ancient. The Kybalion was published in 1908 by the Yogi Publication Society in Chicago, Illinois, and is authored by the 3 initiates. And the 3 initiates is a gentleman named William Walker Atkinson. And part of the treatise in this document, the Kybalion, are these 7 hermetic principles. And these are the principles that are all over the internet and all over witch circles, magical circles, even some self-improvement circles, as ancient teachings. And, this is parallel with many Hermetic teachings, but they're really more representative of what's called the New Thought movement. And in its early days, New Thought was known as Christian Science. Later, you might recognize it in Scientology. And even more later, you might recognize it as being revealed as the secret, capital T, capital S, the secret. So the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, as below, so above, that's in the Kybalion. And it's sometimes simply repeated as like attracts like. And it actually comes from something called the Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus. It means Hermes the thrice great. I have a hard time saying that word. And it's part of this larger Hermetic corpus of work that dates back to the 6th to 8th centuries in the Common Era. So why is this important? It's important because what we'd like you to understand is this idea of simplified as like attracts like, as above, so below as above, is not a dualistic Christian concept or a modern concept per se, but it actually comes from Plato's theories on the macrocosm and the microcosm. So we'll talk about that more in just a little bit. Hang in there with me. We're getting somewhere, I promise. So if you're curious about the Kybalion or the 7 Hermetic principles that William Walker Atkinson writes about, it's been in public domain since 1977, and it's really relatively easy to find anywhere. And Murphy's going to copy a link into the chat, so you can explore that if you want. Personally, I have read it and have studied it and had kind of practiced it a little bit for a while before I really dug into the background of it and learned more about it and learned more about the source, ancient sources versus what was created in the New Thought movement. So I think probably it has some historical interest, but other than that, it's something that is not what we want to consider as a basis for our spellcraft moving forward. So why is this relevant? Other than knowing the history of where our magic thought comes from? Well, what we'd like you to consider is there's actually a lot of inherent privilege in systems like The Secret. You can observe or hear, you might have had run-ins with pop culture talk about the law of attraction or The Secret that doesn't acknowledge any of the socioeconomic or identity-related struggles that are inherent to the practicing of manifesting desires, right? And I'm going to read a quote from Erica Starr, who is a journalist who is writing on medium.com. And Erica says, the steps that are required for manifesting are steps that are more intuitive to the privileged populace. Tips like expect things to come easily to you and expect to receive your wishes and act like you've already received them are synonymous with entitlement. Even envisioning your dream life feels out of reach for someone who has had to work her butt off just to stay afloat. And there's a longer article that journalist has written, and Murphy's going to post the source article for that. And that's really kind of it's an interesting article because it gives a BIPOC opinion on the law of attraction and on manifestation. So does this mean we shouldn't practice attraction spells? Jamie, why are you and Murphy even doing this workshop? No, it doesn't mean that at all. Certainly not. But what it does mean is that we need to approach our spell work with honest self-reflection, with sensitivity and thought to both intention and impact. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, what are some best practices? If I want to practice liberatory spell casting, what should I do? In Wayne the Weaver, we talk about something a lot called the 3 levels of service. And this breaks down to service to yourself, service to your community, and service to that which is greater. So service to yourself is exploring that which is sovereign within you, tending your own powers of resilience, learning to understand your shadow, and deepening your well of joy and connection. Service to your community is the next level. And that means service to those that are near and dear to your heart, your chosen family, the place where you live, and perhaps the wider world. And finally, there's service to that which is greater. And that which is greater refers to the gods, the spirits, unseen ones that speak to you personally, our enlivened, embodied earth, and the arc of justice in the universe. So a good practice for liberatory spellcasting is to check in with yourself, perhaps each quarter if you're doing spell work that often, and ask yourself, what spells am I casting for myself? What spells am I casting for my community? And what spells am I casting for that which is larger? And are my efforts here in balance? What are my impacts? So those are all really good questions and best practices. And now Murphy's going to give us some more concrete examples.
So just some things to think about when you're formulating your intentions for your spells. Are you choosing to manifest things that are reinforcing an oppressive system, such as capitalism? Or are you manifesting things to build a more equitable and sustainable world? So I'm going to break down two sort of categories of like status quo manifestation and radical manifestation. So examples of status quo manifestation would include trying to do a spell to manifest a luxury car, like a Lexus or like some other sort of luxury item. A spell to achieve a status increase within a discriminatory system. So like, I want to be the white CEO of a predominantly white company and make lots of money is like a status increase within a discriminatory system. Political victories within a limited two-party system, doing magic towards that is a status quo manifestation of sorts. I'm not saying that you shouldn't cast spells for these things. Sometimes we do need to manifest these things. But let's also think at the same time about what other magic we can do to create better systems. Like we are in these systems, sometimes we have to navigate them. Attraction spells can help, but how can we think outside the box? So radical manifestation could include bringing resources to grassroots organizations that are meeting community needs locally, building climate resilience for your local systems, installing solar panels, things like that, rematriating land, being able to give land to BIPOC people in your community, to Indigenous people, and back to Indigenous people in your community, building affordable housing cooperatives and small business incubators, things like that. Who is going to like benefit from these spells other than you, and how are you like flipping the systems is something to think about. And those three levels of service to self, community, and that which is greater could definitely can help cue you into like, oh yeah, how am I benefiting the community with my spells? So I'm going to pass it back to Jamie, and we're going to pivot to talking about correspondences, which is something that you may have read about in your like very first book on Wicca. If you came to Wicca in the 90s like I did, but Jamie's going to get into some advanced versions of that as well.
Thanks. So correspondences are very, very important to spell casting. So what do we mean by this term correspondence? Why are we using, and we consider it a technology. Why do we use this technology in spell work? So by definitions, correspondences share close similarity, connection, or equivalence. The idea of correspondences as we apply them to magic and spell work stems from a couple core philosophies. So you remember me mentioning Plato? It stems from the Platonic concept of the microcosm and the macrocosm, as stated in the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. An example of this is the blaze of a roaring bonfire is present in the light of a small single candle. And likewise, the blaze of the bonfire can be equated to the blaze of passion in the heart, or the heat of willpower and action in the gut, in the solar plexus. So that's the concept of as above, so below. And the other thing that correspondences stem from is sympathetic magic. Sympathetic magic is mostly it really is grassroots folk magic. And it's the idea that the practitioner can influence something based on using an object in relationship or resemblance to another thing. For example, you've seen people in different traditions and different manners create a puppet or a little doll to represent someone or something in a spell. This is an example of sympathetic magic. And we see this in folk magic practices around the world and throughout history. One of the most common and accessible ways to utilize the power of correspondence, as Murphy mentioned from everybody's Magic 101 educations, is through study and practice with the elements. So the elements, earth, air, fire, water, spirit, are foundational to our sensory experiences. They exist on several levels. They give personal and impersonal expressions of their nature. So remember our example of fire. Fire exists simply as itself, which is impersonal. And it also exists as the passion in our hearts. And that's very personal, right? So many of us already have some familiarity in working with the elements. And, a question I always have, because I'm curious about how to, always advance my practice, how do I advance my usage of correspondences? And I'd like to leave you with 2 thought seeds tonight about how to grow and deepen correspondences in your spell work. So the first thought seed is learn to layer more and more correspondences. Why should you do this? If you're layering on more and more correspondence, it makes your spell, I would say, louder and more clear to the universe. It enhances the connection, enhances the similarity, and it enhances the equivalence. It's like using an increasingly more powerful magnet, especially when you're doing attraction spells. And you can think creatively about what you can layer on, right? So we think about the elements, we think about having something that represents an element, like maybe we have a candle for fire, but what else can you think of? Can you think of music? Can you think of food? What associates fire with a time of day or a cycle of the moon? Can you include sympathetic visuals or objects or, herbal packets and things like this? Layering on makes your magnet all the more powerful. And perhaps you even include correspondences into your preparations. You can prepare a specially selected meal to eat before or after your spell work, a specially prepared offering, a specially prepared bath. And maybe even you take this over the course of several days to build or heighten the energy, or you do it over the course of several days as a vigil, a magical vigil, while your spell is working. So layering on that correspondence is really important. And the second thought seed that I want to leave you with tonight is intuitive correspondences and your own symbolic language are incredibly important. So what do I mean by this? I mean, take the time to learn how each element feels in your body or your energetic field, and don't be afraid to develop your own tables of correspondence. You do not have to rely on what someone else has written and collated into a table. For example, you can spend a day or week immersing yourself in the element of water and recognize, be reflective. Where is this element hitting in your body? Are you feeling it in your heart? Are you feeling it in your stomach? Are you feeling it in your head? Does it make your skin tingle? Does it make your arms itch? How does this feel, right? Like what are the feelings that you're observing? Are there any sensory or memory impressions that are stirring as you work with this element? Does it always remind you of a memory? Does it always remind you of a certain sound, smell, something like that? What sort of encounters do you have with people or with non-people and what those mean? Those are all really important clues of how you can identify the correspondence of anything to water. If you get to know how it feels in your body and your energetic field and what the clues are, you don't need a table of correspondence. You will be able to designate the alignment, elemental alignment of anything for yourself. And if this concept intrigues you, which it should because it's fun, we cover it in a lot more detail, including practical exercises in Way of the Weaver. But that's all I've got time for tonight. So those 2 thought seeds, layer it on and develop intuitive correspondences for yourself.
So there are many, many types of attraction spells that you could do. The list could be endless. I mentioned earlier, like making a bundle as a talisman. There's so many things you could do. And we encourage you to explore all of the different ways that inspiration is coming to you. And when we teach this unit as a part of a 7 weeks long or 7 lessons long spellwork laboratory class, we go into different forms of spellwork each week that we teach. But we wanted to give you something really concrete and simple and actionable that we can do today and that you can do again tomorrow, and that it can start bringing the change you need into your life right away. And the version of spellwork that we have selected to do that is sigil magic. So sigil magic, the sigil magic that I'm going to present today is the version that I learned through the works of Gordon White, who is a chaos musician, or sorry, chaos magician. Chaos musician sounds pretty cool. He isn't someone whose approach we agree with all the time on all things. We're not blanket endorsing Gordon White. But we are pretty intrigued by this sigil magic version that he's come up with. It comes from the book, The Chaos Protocols, published in 2016. And there's also a blog entry. His most popular blog entry ever is about this magical practice. And if you are registered for this Zoom class versus like viewing it later on YouTube or whatever, we will email you a handout that is a version of his chapter from Chaos Protocols, but it's like a scrubbed version because he has a lot of weird thoughts and bad humor and slightly offensive things in there that like you don't need to read. And that, you can choose whether you want to interface with those by buying his book. But we wanted to give you a little handout based on his principles. T-Thorn Coil also has a book on sigil magic, which I personally haven't read yet, but there's many people with perspectives on this, but it is a more rare and niche form of magic these days. So sigil magic, one of the reasons we wanted to present it is it's a culturally neutral technology as far as I know. I think the closest intact cultural tradition that equates to sigil magic is the Norse tradition of bind runes, where you take some of the sacred runes and you intentionally select ones that align with your intention for the spell, and you combine them into a figure that includes all of the runes, and then that figure is like your magical symbol. So that is in a way a form of sigil. But this is a form of sigil magic that does not have cultural reference really. So it is therefore accessible and not part of a cultural appropriation kind of action. And we thought people would enjoy that about it too. So sigil magic is a magic with drawn figures. So this is like pencil and paper magic, or like marker and birch bark magic, or whatever you want to draw on. It's great. And it uses abstract figures drawn to embody the energy of the thing that you want to attract or accomplish. So in Gordon White's system, you create these abstract symbols using the letters in a sentence of intention. So he gives some very specific ways of formulating that intention. We'll go into that a little bit more later. And you're going to write out the intention as a sentence. The shorter the sentence, the better. Long, complicated, semicolon filled, multiple clause intentions are not the type you want for sigil magic. That might be good for other spells. Sigil magic, you want it short, simple, clear. And once you've written them out, you're going to go through with your pen and you're going to cross out all the vowels. For whatever reason, we just don't incorporate vowels in these sigils. I have not asked Gordon White why. I just do it. Then you go through and you cross out all the duplicate letters. So if in your sentence there's like 5 T's, you cross them out until you just have 1 T. And then you end up with this short list of consonants. And you might, take those and copy those out, just those, 10 consonants or whatever is left. And you're going to creatively combine them into a weird, bizarre sort of symbol. So taking the shapes of those letters, that can be as the precise, accurate shapes, or very like, bent and shifted shapes, whatever appeals to you, and you're going to combine them into a symbol. And it is helpful if you make it look pleasing to your own eye. And so you're going to write this symbol on a nice piece of paper, or you can write it on a tacky scrap of paper. That's fine too. But some people like to have the pretty pens and the nice paper and find that that enhances the work for them. And you will do a simple ritual to activate the sigil. And there's a really fun concept that has to do with the math of probabilities that Gordon White incorporates into this work. And I think this is one of his brilliant innovations with it. And that is that launching many sigils at once is really effective. So instead of launching one symbol for one grand intention, like I want to find the love of my life or something like that, you would break that down into a bunch of different steps and a bunch of different like sub goals. And you would make a sigil for each of those sub goals, and you would launch all of those symbols at once, like launch or activate them. And Gordon White uses the language of fish for this. So he calls launching all of these sigils together a shoal of sigils, which is like a shoal of fish, a group of fish. And he has a really fun little trick that he includes in that, which is called a robofish. And the robofish is a statement that is already true. Now, this is based on a scientific study that was done by people who study fish, and they created a robotic fish that looked like the species of fish they were studying. And this species of fish traveled in schools. And they found that if they put this robotic fish into the school of the fish, and then they made the robotic fish go to the left, the whole school would follow the robofish, no matter where the robofish was in the school. And then if they made it go to the right, the whole school would follow the robofish. So they could effectively steer the whole shoal of fish. So in sigil context, what that means is you write a true statement that is just like absolutely true, like my name is whatever your name is, and you make that into a sigil. And it's a sigil that doesn't actually have to accomplish anything because that thing is already true, but it is aligned with existing truth, and therefore it steers your whole shoal towards being just as true as that true statement that you included as the robofish. Hopefully that makes sense. So in the second part of tonight, we're going to actually have a chance to create sigils and launch them as a shoal with a robofish included. For those of you that are on the call live, we're not going to record that ritual. And the process of activating a sigil is basically taking your sigil written on a card, staring at it, letting your vision go blurry or whatever, and it will seem to maybe like swell up, have a lot of energy in it, and at some point it will deflate. That's Gordon's word for it. And it's interesting. You can watch it do that. Like you stare at it for a while, and you just let it sort of become a little squiggly as your focus goes fuzzy, and then at some point it will deflate, and it will just sort of like go flat again and cease to be this magical moving thing and just be on the page. And then you say these very hard to say words for some people. The words you say are does not matter, need not be, and then you put it aside. So this seems counterintuitive, right? Why would you say that this spell that's obviously important to you or you wouldn't be doing it? Why would you say that this doesn't matter? Why would you say it doesn't need to be? The point is to absorb the sigil into your consciousness, but to have it dwell in your subconscious mind, not in your conscious level of thought. So you're kind of like half forgetting this thing that you have focused on in your mind and letting your subconscious mind do that incubating and that steering of your personal actions that are going to help this thing come true. Gordon White talks about it a lot more in his article. So then you're going to close your ritual, and you're going to finish by placing the sigils around your house where you will see them every day. The intention is for them to just blend into the background and you'll forget what they mean. Kind of the way like you don't even notice when a store sign also says Coca-Cola on it or something like that. It sort of blends into the background. It's like sunk into your consciousness so much it doesn't stick out. So you want the sigil to just, it's the opposite of like writing intentions on your mirror so you read them every morning. You're like gonna stick this on your mirror so you eventually don't even see it anymore. And again, this lets it sink into your subconscious mind, which is where some people believe, including Gordon White, that some of the more powerful manifesting energy lies. And you can dispose of your sigils randomly over time, especially after you forget what they mean. or after the spell is successful, you can just randomly remove them and take them down and dispose of them. Many people like to dispose of them in a magical way, such as burning them, rather than just like putting them in the recycling, because it is a magical object and you want to be like intentionally releasing that energy instead of sending the energy to who knows where it can get into trouble. So we will email you that handout after this class that helps you remember all of that. So the next thing we need to focus on before we go and make our sigils is how to craft a really good intention. And Jamie's going to start us off talking about that.
Considering impact and crafting powerful and precise intentions for our spellcraft. So, it's really important to be very specific and very clear. You can use all the investigative questions of who, what, why.
Somebody needs to maybe mute their microphone. They're getting an echo right now when you're talking, Jamie.
Are we getting an echo?
All right, I think it's fixed now. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so you can use all of the investigative questions, right? Which are who, what, why, where, when, and how. So for example, if I'd like to attract a job opportunity, I can leave it open-ended, which is not recommended, but an example of an open-ended intention would be, I'm casting this spell for a new job. That's very open-ended, right? An example of a clear and specific intention would be the job opportunity I desire, as represented by this spell, draws near to me. It offers satisfying work that is well compensated and a reliable income that meets all my needs. As I monitor my networks and my connections, it presents itself clearly and expediently. It arrives by the next full moon. So that's very clear and specific, right? And from that, you can distill down a statement for your sigil magic, your sigil crafting. And I always like to add a couple things at the end of my intentions. Thinking about the importance of impact, I tend to add something like, may this be for the highest good of all. And a little phrase that I love, magical phrase that I love, this or something better. Because I feel like that covers your bases where the universe may have something way more exciting out there for you that you didn't include in your intent because you couldn't have possibly imagined it until it happened to you. So this or something better is a helpful magical phrase.
Yes, I definitely like that as well. It's wonderful. So I want to talk about some specific guidelines for sigil magic, and these are things drawn from Gordon White's guidelines on successful sigils. So you want to write out your desire, your goal, and you want to use positive words rather than negative words. So like, I have a job that pays me enough that I don't need to worry about money. Instead, well, even that has negatives in it. It pays a job that pays me handsomely, instead of a negative thing like I don't want to be poor anymore or something like that. You putting negative words in there like I don't want this or not this. The subconscious mind tends to not see the negation. It just tends to latch on to the negative, the word of what you don't want, and so you can end up actually attracting that more. You want to have like pretty like clear and fixed goals, like measurable things are really helpful. You want to divide big goals into smaller components and parts and make sigils for each one, and that like shoaling principle that I mentioned earlier. You want to use the present tense, like this thing is true. And you want to describe the completed situation rather than the desire to get there, because then you may just be manifesting perpetually being in the process of getting there instead of actually getting there. So an example would be, I live in a beautiful and affordable apartment that feels like home. So, that's the present tense. I live in a beautiful apartment. It's a completed situation. It feels like home. It's it's affordable. All the things that you wanted to specify. It's concrete, clear, fairly succinct, and present tense. So when we get to writing our sigils in the in the ritual we're going to do together, I will probably copy and paste those into the chat again, but I wanted to make sure that you had them in your mind now as well. So we are going to move into the more interactive phase of this session, most of which we're not going to record, but we will record the bit at the end again as well. So we've been sitting now for almost an hour. We want to give you a chance to do a short comfort break. So we're going to take a 15-minute break. If you don't have it on hand already, you may want to grab a piece of paper and a writing implement. It can be plain or fancy, whatever you want, that you can use when you're launching sigils with us after our breakout rooms. And when you come back in let's do about 5 after, would be a little almost 15 minutes from now, at 5 after the hour. When you come back in, we're going to go straight into breakout rooms. Your breakout rooms will have 4 to 5 people per room. And this is a space for you to share discussion, thoughts, initial reactions to everything we've presented so far. You can introduce yourselves, do brief little check-ins, react and share to what we've taught. Please remember the principle of take space and make space. So if you're someone who usually feels very comfortable talking and busting in like me, then you might want to practice a little more silence, a little more pausing and making space for others to step forward. Or if you're someone who often is a little on the shyer side and takes some time to formulate your thoughts, give yourself the time you need, but make sure you do come in and say the things you'd like to say and contribute to that discussion. So another thing you can do in your breakout rooms is create and workshop an intention for an attraction magic sigil. So maybe I'll actually put those principles in the chat right now so you can use them. So once you've had a chance to introduce yourselves, have a little discussion, you can help each other workshop an intention and create and improve intentions for the spell that you want to do tonight. If you want to share, if you don't want to share your intention with your breakout group, you don't have to. And we will have 30 minutes for the breakout groups. So please use them well, and you'll be facilitating your own groups. And then we'll come back in and we'll do a sigil creation session and a little ritual to launch all of our sigils together. So it's time for the comfort break, and we will come back together at about 5 after the hour for our breakout rooms.
Murphy, we did get a few questions in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we did. We got a couple questions in the chat. Would we like to answer them now before the break in the last 5 minutes of this hour, or should we answer them just after comfort break?
Let's answer them now so they're on the recording. That would be nice. Okay.
Yeah, so the first question from Anna Katie Allen says, how do we boil down long intention into a shorter one? So, and I think that might refer to the long intention I read about a job. So, so what I would do with that, that would be kind of my long version of the intention, and using the parameters that Murphy's laid down for us, I would probably shorten my sigil creation to something like, I am enjoying my ideal job. That's how, you can have that long intention, and and it's very important, and you can read it when you're launching your sigil. You can read it as part of a ritual or part of a circle casting to do this spellcraft. But I would basically take that longer intention where I've really investigated what I want to attract and boil it down to a very simple sentence that's in the present tense. I'm enjoying my ideal job. Does that make sense?
I think another thing you could do to break down a longer intention into a shorter one is to do that thing where you chop it up into many different intentions. So, like, I'm enjoying my ideal job. I have really great work hours in my job. I have great relationships with my coworkers. I am happy at the way I'm moving forward in my career. I'm being compensated really well for the work that I do. Like, all of these could be different sigils that you launch. They don't have to be all in one sigil. And also, long intentions are great. Long intentions are fantastic for other kinds of attraction magic. It's just with sigils that it really helps to make them short and sweet.
Maybe you have many small, like small sigils that are your shoal, your shoal of uh, work sigils that you launch together. We also have a question from Olive that says, I'm a bit confused on the perspective of how spells work versus the law of attraction. Are there aspects of the law of attraction that you understand as true? Do you want to share thoughts on that, Murphy?
I think that's your wheelhouse.
Okay, I'll share, but you tag on if you have more. So, the law of attraction boiled down very simply to like attracts like. I do believe working magically with your correspondences for um, what you want to attract does work and is valid and is worthwhile. So I guess you could say, yes, I understand that part of it. I don't know if I would use the word true, but I do understand how the mechanism of that part of it works. The problem with the law of attraction is um, that specific phrase, law of attraction, doesn't refer to a magical precept or an ancient precept. It refers to a modern construct that's often infused with a lot of privilege and problematic statements, if that makes sense. So I do believe in the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, as below, so above, which can be reduced to, the like attracts like. I hope that clears it up. I mean, it's a little bit of difference in like the technology is sound and the magical practice is sound, but the way that people are constructing it and presenting it in the modern context is problematic.
I think things that are labeled as the law of attraction in modern time or as the secret or whatever, like there's the Hermetic principle is in there and that we're on board with. And then there's tons and tons of layers of like entitlement and privilege in there too. And there's a lot of philosophy and like the secret and stuff like that about like, you deserve this. And like, there's no reason not to have a $500,000 mansion and another summer home over here and all these things. And like, you don't have to worry about impact at all. That's not a part of anything that is in your imagination. There's a lot of denial of oppressive systems that we're in the way those are presented or just an invisibilizing of them. So we're on board with that Hermetic principle, but not with the like value system that is usually presented with it.
Yeah, and we want to avoid the type of bypassing, like any spiritual bypassing. And we want to avoid the judgments that, well, if you can't manifest what you desire, you must not be working hard enough, or you must not be good enough, or you must not be committed to it, or you must not be trying hard, or any of those things. That doesn't really account for systemic problems and privilege and where people are coming at, where people are in society and life. So that's the kind of stuff with law of attraction that we want to avoid.
Jamie, we have another question if you're ready for another question, which is from Lotus. Is there further reading on correspondences that y'all would recommend?
I would actually, you'll have to forgive me. I'm not at home. My internet service provider, had a service outage. So I'm actually at my partner's office right now and I don't have my library with me, so I can't grab the book. But there are a couple of books that I really like that mention correspondence, but they're actually books on tarot that go into the symbology, because the elements and correspondences are something that's really prevalent in tarot. And I would love to give you those books and the authors, but I can't think of them off the top of my head, and I don't have my bookshelf just off to the left. So, but I will make a note of that. And when I send out the links to our resources and to the video and all those things, I will put those resources in there as well. So I'm sorry about that.
I would say on correspondences, I don't usually work too much with written sources for correspondences. I've sort of absorbed the basic elemental principles a long time ago and work fairly intuitively from there. And I would say, like, check in with yourself and see, are you a person whose experience of the world is deeply enhanced by book learning? Because there are definitely a lot of people like that. Or are you a person whose experience in the world is enhanced by like personal reflection and like emotional connection and things like that? Because there can be, this sort of plays into what Jamie was talking about of coming up with your own correspondences. In many like witchy books, it'll be like the color for a money spell is green, and the only reason they're saying that is because they're authors that live in the United States of America, where our money is printed in green ink, which is not true in most other places. So like that's a very like culturally specific correspondence. And maybe you wish to like hark back to earlier times when like gold and silver were the symbols of wealth, and not like base your symbology around money by like the US Treasury. That could be a powerful choice for you. So I think like reflecting on like what are the associations that are really personal to me in my life. You might have an association for money that was purple because like your dad always gave you like $20 in a purple envelope on your birthday or something like that. Like it could be very, very personal. So I would say don't be bound by the written word on correspondences, because there might be something that's more powerful for you but not for anyone else in your own experience.
Yeah, we tend to take just kind of in general. Sometimes we refer to, if it's written down, it's right versus like trusting our own intuition. And it's actually far more in the service of liberation and justice to trust our own intuition and to kind of harvest our own wisdom. And oftentimes we use the example of a Venn diagram when we talk about these things. Because I really love what Murphy said. If you're a person that goes mostly with just intuition and book learning is not something that resonates with you, I love that. And I also think that there's probably some of us out there that are combinations of both. And so I always try to investigate my own intuition first. And then I go to, other sources, primary or secondary sources, whether that be like, researching over the internet or researching in books or talking to other folks. And then I use a sort of Venn diagram. And if you don't know what that is, you've probably seen one. It's overlapping circles. And it's to prove like a commonality between two things. And so I kind of see where my intuitive info has overlapped with something I've researched. And so not that I'm devaluing my intuitive info, because I still value that highly, but it's kind of a nice confirmation when it overlaps with something I later find through research and study.
You may start to notice that in the way of the Weaver program, we're really big on personal responsibility and personal reflection. Like we have everyone write their own code of honor for magical ethics, and rather than like giving people one they have to follow, it's like could be different for each person. So we're always into personalizing things.
Why do you have to call me out in my stack of unread books?
That's great. Thank you, Lotus.
I resonate with that comment. We should probably do
a stack like that.
Yeah, we should probably go to our comfort break. Murphy, what do you think?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, definitely. Okay, since it's 6:05 my time, 7:05 on the East Coast. 15-minute break. We'll come back at 20 minutes after the hour.
See you all then.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Awesome. So we just had, for those on the live call, we just launched 32 sigils together in a beautiful ritual. We don't record our rituals because it's sacred space, but if you're watching the recording, you can create a ritual for yourself and launch your sigils. And the invitations to practice that we want to offer to you to like move this work forward in your life are to put that sigil where you will see it every day. Another thing you could do is you could make a list of all of the things you might want to attract into your life through spell work, and then go back and examine your like big brainstorm list and see how you can like tweak it and make it even better with an eye to the 3 levels of service that we talked about. Like how do these goals serve you, your community, and that which is greater? How are they radical, or how do they just sort of reinforce the status quo, and look at the ways that you can make your intentions like the best that they can be. Then if you would like to pick one thing from the list to work on attracting, you can write a spell intention and You could either do more sigils, or you can do a more traditional attraction spell of collecting items with correspondences related to that goal and designing a little ceremony around it, combining or uncombining things in a symbolic way. And one of the correspondences that a lot of people like to work with is to cast attraction spells under the waxing moon. So we just launched all our sigils one day past the full moon. So that wasn't in alignment for our sigils, but I think that we had a lot of other alignment that can compensate for that in terms of all of us working together on this stuff and having a great robofish. But keep in mind, like the moon phase, the season, the time of day, all those things when you're thinking about when to cast that spell to give it a little extra oomph. So those are the invitations to practice that we want to suggest for you. They're just totally invitations. You don't need to do any of them, but we wanted to give people like prompts for further work. And then we wanted to let you know about our programs under the Way of the Weaver program. We have like several programs that we run as the Way of the Weaver sort of organization, and a bunch of them are open for enrollment this fall. Our sort of flagship program is the foundation year, which we will be launching another one of those this October. And the foundation year is 9 months of magical study and community building. It has both 4 in-person retreats in Vermont and 9 Zoom sessions that take place like in between them, so that we can cover more content and teaching that we can then use that time of the in-person retreats for like connection and discussion and ritual, and not so much for lecture. And yeah, really just using the different formats in the best way that we can, so that we're building lots of community both on and off of Zoom. So that is starting in October and goes through the following July. And we also have Zoom only modules that we developed during the pandemic when we couldn't meet in person. And still, when we meet in person, there is still a pandemic and we'll be using lots of precautions. But if you'd prefer to engage on Zoom only, or you want to study a really specific topic with us, that's a way to do it. Lots of people do both at the same time. So the modules that we'll be offering soon, this fall, starting in September around the equinox, we'll be offering death prestixing. Prestixing with an X is our gender neutral word for like facilitating spiritual process. And that's starting around the equinox. That is, 3 months of study every other Monday night at this very time that we are meeting now, 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern time. We will meet and have a class just like this that's 3 hours long, that includes lecture and breakout groups and like actual embodied practice together and prompts for practice afterwards. And we build a lot of community with those classes. We have like a text thread going and an email list, and we find ways to keep in touch and ask each other questions throughout the time that we are together as a unit and beyond. Those communication channels stay up. In the spring, or really starting at the winter solstice, so the winter into spring, we will be offering once again our module Divination for Liberation, which is our take on all forms of divination. And so we cover tarot, runes, pendulums, scrying, all kinds of different forms of divination. And it's a really fun one. We just like really love that class. And then we do have a full 3-month module on spellwork that we call Spellwork Laboratory. And last year we ran that in the spring, and we found out that nobody likes to be on Zoom on a beautiful spring evening. So we're thinking of running that in the fall in 2022, and sort of running our Zoom modules in the dark half of the year and honoring that summer energy in the lighter part of the year. And we may also develop other modules as like the need for them in the world arises, or as people bug us about things they want us to teach. So let us know what you would like to see and what you would like to learn, and we'll have fun making it happen. And also, you've heard me and Jamie talk a lot tonight, and we wanted to give a chance for some people who've been through some of these programs, either the foundation year or the Zoom modules or both, to just speak a couple of words about their experience. So there were, let's see, Mixie and Rose both volunteered ahead of time to do that, but I know there's other people on this call that have been in our programs as well. So if y'all want to unmute and say a few words, now is the time.
Hi, good evening. I took 2 of the 3 Weaver Zoom modules. I'm considering taking the death prefixing one this fall because I did not, that was the one I didn't do. I mean, I would say this evening is like strongly representative of the Zoom modules. Solid framing, some like thoughtful context, well-researched, substantiated context offered to help frame whatever it is being covered. Yeah, opportunities for both shared practice as well as like community workshopping of ideas and magical practices. So, you know, there is both like a funneling down from, but also like swirling around and across, which again is representative of the Zoom modules and the way the Weaver style as I've experienced it. The divination for liberation really did result for me in a, at least for that season, and a little bit beyond, in a daily divination practice. And so it's a strong invitation to practice. Like, what is it like the daily practice? And that was a particularly strong season for me in terms of daily practice. I'll leave it there because I know there's a bunch of other folks here who have taken these as well. But thank you, Murphy. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, everyone. Good evening.
Thanks, Rose. I'm Mixie. I've done all the Weaver stuff. I started out in the first foundational year, and I helped web tend for the 3 modules, and it's all been great for me. I think what's wonderful is the 3 levels of service that it comes back to, and it helps me think about a lot of things in life in that way. And like on the personal level, like my personal practice has never been so strong as with the Weavers. It's just really wonderful to have people who are doing the same type of work as you are, and you get to see the creativity that they bring into that work. And it just inspired me on a constant basis to be doing that work. And also the just like personal healing work and like the deepening of my spiritual work, like being with the Weavers just really equipped me to you know, do everything a little bit better with my magic. On the community level, it's just like the just being with the community, first of all, is really wonderful. But then I learned so much about what I can offer to the community around me, like whatever that might be, whether it's you know, it just really encouraged me to go deeper with my divination. Divination is something that's really easy to offer to people who might need help around you. It's something that people are really interested in, even if they might not be magic practitioners all the time. Drawing some runes and talking about them, drawing a few tarot cards, and just feeling like I had the groundwork of ethics and consent and cultural, avoiding cultural appropriation, to be able to offer that and feel secure in what I was doing was really wonderful. And then from that higher level of that which is more, like the Weavers are into deity. You've seen it tonight. So if you want to learn more about deity, I mean, it's the place to be. What Jamie and Murphy shared about their personal connection with deities just really helped me to develop a connection I already had. But it just gave me a lot of skills to deepen that connection, especially trance skills and trance practice really enabled that connection in a way that I hadn't realized was possible before. And I mean, it took it out of like doing a single trance in a workshop with someone to how can I do my own trance? How can my trance practice give me access to the deity work? I mean, from just that simple level of animism and, you know, like the spirit that is all the way around us, up to like very specific deities and working with deities and doing that in a way that is ethical and okay, and then actually accessing and like aspecting deity was like the ultimate wrap up for that in a way that was really safe and was really that I was able to do something that I never thought that I would do before. And accessing that has given me more purpose with that higher level thing, that high level of what are we doing? Why are we here? well, what does it all mean? That is something that's really blossomed for me in Way of the Weaver. So I hope to see you, and thank you, Jamie and Murphy.
Sage Owen, I see you raising your hand. You're welcome to speak if you want.
Yeah, I think for me, I left a really toxic faith community. And so Jamie and Murphy were actually recommended to me by my very good friend Jules, who had done the foundation year, I think, with Mixie. And just the ideas of like radical consent and making space and taking space and the 3 levels of service were something that allowed me to re-engage with a practice that felt much more grounded in a animism and a spirituality and a paganism, for lack of a better word, going back to my ancestry, that it really felt much more real and much more sustainable than what I had previously known. And so it was something that really allowed me to reclaim my own spirituality and my own consent in relationship to my spiritual community and my magic community.
Thank you for those words, Sage Owen. So I'm putting in the chat the link to find out more about our programs. They are all sliding scale. The Zoom sliding scales go down to 0. The in-person ones cost us a lot of money to put on, so they can't do that. But that's there if you want to look at it more. And Jamie, do you want to speak to this stuff at all? I've been doing all the talking.
I think you're doing a wonderful job. I think it's great. I have nothing to add at this time.
Awesome, thank you. So we're going to wrap up to respect the time commitment that everyone has made. Again, there's absolutely no cost for tonight's program, but I am putting back in the chat the links to the funds that you can donate if you want to for reproductive justice in the Deep South and for BIPOC land empowerment in the North. Thank you so much all for being here. This has been such a lovely group, and I feel this feels like a Way of the Weaver session. Like I think this is representative of the type of people that gather in circles and that we are very, very grateful for. So we're going to close our session tonight by bidding farewell to the unseen ones that we invoked in the beginning of the session and doing a closing grounding.
Yes. Oh, that was wonderful. I have here our magical little LED candle that has represented the flame of our hearth through this whole session tonight, through our learning and our magic and our laughing and our time together. And I'd like to thank all those unseen ones who gathered tonight and who might always be around. Everyone from the creeping, crawling, swimming, slithering, flying, dancing ones to the guides and the gods and the ancestors, the elements, the spirits of land and place, all those who gather out of love, out of curiosity, out of learning. We thank you so much for your ongoing presence. Go if you will, or stay with us if you like. With our gratitude, blessed be. And I will blow it in.
And we will finish with a closing grounding. Grounding is one of those really, really core skills that we come back to again and again as weavers. As we move into more and more advanced work, our grounding is more and more important. So we'll just do a simple grounding tonight. I invite you to feel the weight of your body against whatever is holding it up. Your chair, the floor, the bed, wherever you're at, with the lawn under your feet. I can imagine people in many places as they're listening to these words. And feel the weight of your body and feel the weight of your body coalesce into an energetic cord at the place where you are touching the thing below you, where gravity is bringing you together to kiss. And let that energetic cord sink down with gravity along with it. Sink down to the ground, to the soil, wherever you are. You may have to go through several stories of a house. You might have to go through the bottom of a car, but let that cord sink down to the ground, but it's always there as a reservoir of energy for us and as energy that we are contributing to and building with our lives and actions. And you can let yourself release anything extra in your energy field right now, anything that doesn't serve you, any buzzing excitement from that ritual that's going to keep you up tonight. You can just release that down, and then you can feel that the ways that that energy can nourish you, that energy can flow up that energetic channel, that energetic cord into your body, and fill in anything that's gotten ragged, that seems out of sorts. Comfort it with that rich, earthy energy. And you can take a few minutes, just balance between yourself and the earth, draw up the energy that you need, send back the energy that you don't need, until you feel balanced, whole, restful, calm, centered. And then you can draw that cord back up into the part of you that is sitting on whatever's below. And you can give yourself a shake off anything that you don't want around. Roll your shoulders a little bit, let your body use its intelligence to remind you of its boundaries, its edges, its capabilities. And be grounded, be whole, be blessed. Go with the good energy that we've created here together in your heart. And we will hope to see you again when the time is right, in a Weaver program, at another Vermont witch camp, on some other Zoom call somewhere, on the street randomly, wherever we see each other again, it'll be the right time. So have a great night, everybody.
Thanks again, everyone. Good night. Good night.
Thanks so
Blessed
much.
be.
Awesome.